Hey everyone, so we read William Bradford's Plymouth Plantation. That's his take. Of course, he has an agenda. Let's take a look at another view. Right, to be cynical, we could say that history is written by the winners. Consider if Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan won World War II, how they would write history. Not that I'm saying, the history of the United States and, Nazis are anywhere close. However, we have to take a look at historical writing and understand it in context. And also, as Italo Calvino says, that we need to read receptively and also resistantly. So we want to take in and we need to take it in, but we also need to resist it in a way. It's like, wait a second here. What is your agenda? You're writing to an audience, you're writing for posterity. And great books like Lies My Teacher Told Me show perhaps the errors or the omissions in history class or history books that may have an agenda, that may want to support this idea that these different authors have set down, and we just accept it as truth when there are many different sides to history. Okay, let's take an example of Plymouth Rock, all right? It's like our touchstone. Here we see the Mayflower in the background. We see the landing party arriving on Cape Cod. And of course, it's like divine providence. He is almost touching the holy stone, and he's looking up to God for like deliverance. It's almost like Moses coming into Egypt saying, thank you, God, for delivering us from bondage. And we've now found a new Eden. Right? We see a woman in the background, giving up her hands, and we see people bringing in the longboats. They probably wouldn't have women on the landing party, but again, it's this misinterpretation of what it was like. And if you read books like Nathaniel Philbrick's Mayflower, we actually see them landing on Cape Cod, like Wells Fleet in different places, and then finding buried stashes of corn in winter, and they thought God had buried corn for them, when really they were just stealing the Native American stashes of corn that they used over the winter. But they interpreted it as God burying this for us, when it was just the wrong idea. Okay, here we have another image, very similar. We have the Mayflower in the background. Look at that mountain in the background. There are no mountains like that in Massachusetts. There's not even mountains like that in the Berkshires, and I love the Berkshires. No, that is something that you will not find. You might find that in Maine at Mount Desert Island, but you're not going to find that in Massachusetts. But here you have a romantic representation of the birth of a nation. All right, take a look at some of these characters. Of course, the man is at the forefront. We have women comforting women. We have one kneeling down in prayer. We have the one woman holding a baby. We have another woman holding the hand of a little child. We have another man holding a woman climbing up to this rock. We have another woman laying her head and hand on the shoulder. And this is one of, again, deliverance. Okay, thank you, God, for delivering us, this divine providence. And, that's Providence, Rhode Island is named that for a reason. Although that's a different foundation, that's more of a Catholic thing with Roger Williams. But we still get the same idea. This is all creating this birth of a nation mythos, all right? This kind of origin story that we all believe in. Okay, here we get the first inclination of, there are other people here. But notice the contrast here. We have the evil villain who's kind of depicted in a devilish form bowing before those of power, of the white man with their steel and their spears, and the women and the children being afraid of this devilish heathen character. All right, here we have, again, another romantic depiction of religious devotion. All right, we have the minister with the Bible. That would not be Shakespeare, okay? And them all looking heavenly with the light on the various faces, the glow in the upper left corner, faces looking benevolently up to God. If you notice here, the weapons that they were employing against the Native Americans as defense are gone. They're all like laying in the front there. And it just shows that there's the one side and then there's the other side. All right, there's the where we are a religious people, but we will use arms if we need to. And when I see from this picture too, if we see right up here in the upper right corner, this picture, this is probably them in Holland before they left, so asking God for help. Right, in this picture we have what I see as the Mayflower Compact, which definitely, you know, if you look at the Mayflower Compact from William Bradford, you can definitely say it definitely sided with the Pilgrims, and it was sort of like a contract, you know, between the Native Americans and the William Bradford and the Pilgrims, saying that, listen, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to agree not to, you know, kill each other, and this is what we're, you know, this is our agreement, okay? And this, you know, lays down the foundation. This is like one of those Hammurabi codes or U.S. Constitution kind of documents. All right, this is probably an image you know very well from elementary school about the first Thanksgiving. Native Americans, okay, they would not be dressed like that in November, okay? It is freezing in Massachusetts, okay? But again, depicting them as savages, them sitting down on the ground. Civilized people sit on chairs, and of course we have the benevolence of a white woman giving the brown people, you know, food, when really it was the Native Americans teaching the invaders, you know, how to plant and how to use fish as fertilizer because it's great fertilizer. Okay, here we have another depiction of the first Thanksgiving. And again, this is all about the national myth, right? We have the patriarch giving thanks. Everyone has their head bowed. You see a Native American really, they're sitting out here, and there's one or two at the end of this table, but featured, they're buried. If you notice, it is those that are in front with their heads bowed that are praying for Thanksgiving. All right, this is from the beginning of the chapter. Considering that virtually none of the standard fare surrounding Thanksgiving contains an ounce of authenticity, historical accuracy, or cross-cultural perception, why is it so apparently ingrained? Is it necessary to the American psyche to perpetually exploit and debase its victims in order to justify its history? So writes Michael Doris. All right, think about that. Here's another from the book. European explorers and invaders discovered an inhabited land. Had it been pristine wilderness then, it probably would possibly still be, for neither the technology nor the social organization of Europe in the 16th or 17th centuries had the capacity to maintain of its own resources outpost colonies thousands of miles from home. All right, so that's why there's so many fields in Massachusetts, Springfield, Enfield, because they were already plowed. There were already, you know, fields growing full of corn and beans were growing up corn stalks because it was a great way to like maximize the yield. And the Pilgrims said, thank God, God killed all these people because they gave us fields. Here's another one. Europeans were able to conquer America not because of their military genius or their religious motivation or their ambition or their greed. They conquered it by waging premeditated biological warfare. Okay, I read in the book that anywhere from like 93% to like 97% of the Native American population was wiped out by smallpox. And they saw that as God intervening, getting rid of obstacles to create the new world, or their new world. Again, this is from Lies My Teacher Told Me. Beginning the story in 1620 also admits the Dutch, who are living in now Albany, in 1614. So this whole thing about 1620 really avoids the Dutch in Albany and, of course, John Smith in Jamestown in 1607. But the mythic origin of the country we know now is Plymouth Rock and the year 1620. And here is a segment from a history book with the American tradition. Let me read it to you. After some exploring, the Pilgrims chose the land around Plymouth Harbor for their settlement. Unfortunately, it arrived in December and were not prepared for the New England winter. However, they were aided by friendly Indians who gave them food and showed them how to grow corn. When warm weather came, the colonists planted, fished, hunted, and prepared themselves for the next winter. After harvesting their first crop, they and their Indian friends celebrated the first Thanksgiving. Does that sound like, or does that look like any of the visual depictions of those painters that we saw in the beginning? I don't think so. Okay, sorry for stretching this out, but within 3 years, the plague wiped out between 90% and 96% of the inhabitants of coastal New England. All right, the Indian societies were devastated. Okay, and in fact, if you're interested in reading about King Philip's War, a war that was so deadly it killed a greater percent of the population of the American population at the time than any other war, including the Civil War. It was brutal. I'm not sure history teachers talk about it as much, but it's very interesting to read. So again, from the book, Thanksgiving dinner is a ritual with all the characteristics assigned to the observations of like the origin myth. That number one, it constitutes the history of acts of founders, the supernaturals. So William Bradford, a supernatural. George Washington, in a way, a supernatural. Number two, it is considered to be true. Number three, it tells how an institution came into existence. Number four, in performing the ritual associated with the myth, one experiences knowledge of the origin and claims one's patriarchy. So when we reenact Thanksgiving dinner, we are taking part of what the supernaturals took part of, therefore becoming a part of that experience. Thus, number five, one lives the myth as if it's a religion. Okay? All right, and lastly, we have this Thanksgiving as the national origin myth. Like Independence Day, like Memorial Day, Thanksgiving celebrates our ethnocentrism. We have seen, for example, how King James and the early Pilgrim leaders gave thanks for the plague, which proved then that God was on their side. The archetype associated with Thanksgiving, God on our side, civilization wrestled from the wilderness, order from disorder, hard work, and all these good Pilgrim traits continue to radiate from our history books. All right. And so we need to be able to say, okay, this is what our history books tell us, but what are the other sides of the story that are missing?